making a tape of our dearly beloved matriarch of the family, Ella Evelyn Carlson Sundell Smith Zeiss.
Well, you didn't have to
She's
get
going to talk about her life, her family, her birth in Sweden. She's going to go through the gamut.
Now, does that
Give us as much information as she can to pass on to her children, her grandchildren, and her great-grandchildren, and may more of them be coming.
and there might be
Okay,
great,
with that,
great ones.
I'd like to turn it over to Ella. And Ella, we'll ask you a few questions, and maybe you can
Go ahead.
talk about it a little bit. You were born June 8th, 1907 in Sweden. Tell us a little bit about your life in Sweden as you can remember it as a child there, and then tell about your voyage over to America.
Well, I tell you, when we were in Sweden, we lived in a what I would call a house that was all in one row, and then we had an upstairs to that. And I was the third youngest up, and then I had my sister Sonia. Sonia was 3 years younger than I, and Greta was 3 years older than I, and Martha was 18 months older than Greta. So we were all 4 of us girls, and I was the one that always liked to be with my mother when she was washing the floor and doing up all the cleaning. I thought, oh, I can't talk about that.
Well, tell us about where were you born? What town? What province?
And we were born in
Absolutely.
we were born in Karlstad, and we lived there till we came here to America. And my 2 sisters, they went to school there, but I never did because I wasn't old enough. So
Where was Raymond born?
here.
Oh.
So it was the 4 of us, and I always was with my mother most of the time because the other kids, they were too busy. Sonia and I were always closer to my mother, and then I would go around when she washed the floor and that, which was always done later on at night. And I would go with her out, and when it was 10 o'clock there, it was just like daylight out there. It was just something beautiful. So then my mother would come in, and we'd all get ready for bed. And then, just about a week after that, I was going into the different ladies. My mother was busy cleaning and that, and I went over and asked the ladies to come on over and have coffee. My mother wanted you to come over, and she could have just fallen down when she saw these ladies. They said, you better fix us coffee. Ella told us you had it. So my mother left everything and cooked the coffee, and we sat and visited and had a nice time. And then she said after they left, don't you ever go and do that again.
Did you have electric power?
Asking her to come on over. And then Martha and Greta went to school. Then Greta got scarlet fever, and she had to go to the hospital. So Martha and I would go over and visit her while she was out in the yard. So Martha says, Greta, she says, here's the stone, rub this on your face so I can come in there with you. Because she wanted to get scarlet fever too.
Say, what kind of heat and light did you have in those days?
We just had kerosene lamps.
And heat?
And heat, well, that was wood or coal, and they cooked and baked and everything with that cook stove.
With wood, though, right?
Always
Wood.
Wood or coal.
And then we had the old coffee pot on the stove all the time, which was egg coffee.
What kind of coffee grounds? Would you buy coffee at a store? How would they grind the coffee?
We ground our own coffee.
Yeah.
We always bought the whole beans. And then Ma would grind up so much and put it in a jar.
Would you have a hand grinder then?
And we had a hand grinder.
Yeah.
It went like this.
Where were you baptized? Remember the name of the church?
I was baptized in Kalsta in Doomshitka when I was 3 months old. I don't think I was quite 3 months, but it was pretty close to 3 months.
What kind of church?
And Doomshitka, that was a Lutheran church.
Was it Stav Church or was it just a regular platform?
No, it was a great big church, and it had a great big steeple on it.
Wood or brick or what?
No, that was brick.
Okay.
And it was a real nice church.
What did your father do? For a
And Pa had worked, it was a white shirt job, but what it was and what it was called, I can't remember. But that place is still there, and the school is still there that my sisters went. And then I would go with, Ma would go to the creek where we didn't live too far to get all the clothes washed. And finally we got a good scrub board and a pail where Ma could just go and get the water, and she'd stand and wash clothes that way.
Where, in the creek, you mean?
What?
Oh,
By the house.
Yeah, we did that in the creek too, so she soaked a lot of clothes that way.
You didn't have a laundry tubs or?
And then we had the laundry tubs, and Ma got that, so she got it in the house and got the water.
But
Then they finally had a pump outside.
no ringers or anything to dry?
No
them?
ringers. We all helped her to wring
Oh,
the clothes with our hands.
how about ironing them?
Well, we had an iron that we put on the stove, and we had an old ironing board that stood on 2 chairs.
Oh.
And then they would iron that way. And everything we had, we cooked right on the stove.
How many rooms in your home?
There was, my 3 sisters and myself had 1 room, and Pa and Ma had another room. But they were very, very small.
And then you had the living room, kitchen together?
We had the kitchen and the living room. Of course, we didn't go into that too much because that was mostly for company.
The parlor.
And
How about your toilet?
how about what?
Your toilet.
Your toilet.
Toilet. Well, we had
Was
had
that Swedish?
outside toilet.
Oh. A
We-
2-holer or a 4-holer?
Back 2-holer.
2-holer.
A back house.
The back house.
And but we didn't have any of that until we got here. Then we had a bathroom.
Well, speaking of here, Ella, what prompted your family to come here and how did it happen?
Well, the reason we came here was that they said that the streets were made of gold here. And
You had heard this over there.
and that's what we heard, and everything was so wonderful.
Times were tough in Sweden, in other words?
So then my dad, he decided to go because his sister had wrote and said that we will send you the money if you will come here. Because they were pretty wealthy farmers here in Minnesota.
Just your dad, though.
So then my dad, he came in June, and we came in November, the worst month of all.
Oh, wait, did he get a job here then and then
And
send for
my-
you?
My father, he got a job on the railroad, working for 15 cents an hour. And then he thought that wasn't, he had to look for something else, so he got a job at Steel and Machinery. They just built the steel and machinery at that time for the war. So he had a job there for about 4 hours a day. So
World War One.
working with the things for the army,
World War One, right?
World War One, yeah. And then Pa wanted us to come as soon as possible, so my aunt and uncle then sent us the rest of the money to come. And we came here, my mother, and we packed up everything we had, the little things we had. And my mother had to come across with 4 girls.
What kind of boat did you book passage on?
And the boat we went on, I'll swear it was a cattle boat. It was terrible.
How
And
many
we were on the water for 14 days. And my mother had to take care of 4 girls that had nothing but throwing up all the time.
Was it cold?
And cold.
Was it?
And we couldn't get up out anywhere, but stay in our room because the weather was so bad.
North Atlantic, huh?
Nobody could go up on the deck.
Were you fed on the boat, Mother?
Fed?
Did you get meals on the boat?
Oh, sure, if you could go, but I could never make it. Greta was the only one that could make it to
The
go
mess
for
hall.
meals. So I went one day. She says, "Come on now, Ella, you get up, and we're going to go and go to the table." So
You're what age now, the
I
girls?
came to the table, and the dishes was moving. So I had to run back as fast as I could. So that was the last of that. I never went.
Would they bring you a sandwich then or something?
They had to bring us our food.
How old were the children, you and your sisters at this point? And how old was your mother at this point?
Well, Mom must have been, I don't remember how old Mom was, but my sister was 3 years old, and I was 6 years old. Well, I would have been 6.5 in December. And Greta was,
8.
she was 9 years
Okay.
old, and Martha was 15 months older than her, so she was,
10 plus.
she was 15 months older than Greta. That was,
A little over 10.
yeah, she was 10.
Where did your boat land?
And our boat landed in Canada. Then when we came across, we had to get off of that big boat, and I don't know what they call these little boats that we had to get from our big boat to that little boat to go to shore.
Ferry?
Dinghy.
And so my mother had us right in one bunch, and so then a man came and helped to lift us off so we could get into the other boat. That was an awful, awful thing.
How many people came over on that boat from the old country? There was more than your family, wasn't there?
Oh, there was a lot of people.
Like hundreds?
Oh, I would say a couple hundred.
Okay.
And then one man was so nice when we were in there. He came and gave us some bananas. So we didn't know what bananas was, so we played with them for a while. And Martha said, "Let's play store." And so we played store with them, and then we threw them away because we didn't know what a banana was. So, but he just was going to be nice to give us something.
What happened to your hair on the ship?
My hair, I had long, long, long braids. I had 2 long braids, and I was the one that had the longest hair. Greta's hair was all right, but it was scrawly and thin, and Martha had a good head of hair. But I had the braids, so the longest braids of all of them. So when my mother had to keep washing my hair every day on account of.
Oh, you did? Were able to wash it on the boat?
No, I had upchucked all the time, and we had to have water to do that.
How did you get from the Atlantic Ocean to Minnesota?
Well, that's when we got off the big boat, our cattle boat.
In Toronto, though, wasn't it?
Huh?
It wasn't in Alice. Where was it at? Toronto?
Yeah,
Canada?
Canada.
Toronto or Ontario?
No.
I think
Well,
Toronto's in Ontario.
Yeah.
it was.
But didn't you take a train to get here?
No, and then we were there for I don't know how long, a couple of days,
You had a process.
and then we had to take the train.
To Minnesota.
Then we took the train to Canada. We didn't come on the boat. We
Yeah.
came. Liverpool is where I think we got off.
Okay. And then took a train across Canada.
Yeah, and we came to Canada, and there's where we had to take another train then
Down to Minneapolis.
to come to Minneapolis. And that was quite a trip. And then when we got here, Pa had found a house, which was full of bed bugs and everything else.
In South Minneapolis?
So we couldn't, right by Lake Street on Minnehaha. So then we finally got settled there, and then all we could do, we couldn't talk. And poor Ma, Ella, she says, you'll have to go across the street and get some milk. And it was a little dark outside. So, and then there was a cop there, and he talked to me, and I don't know what he said, but I suppose he said that was a little late, or you're a nice little girl or something. But I got so scared I stood and peed in my pants, and then I ran home. And Ma said, well, I suppose he just said what a nice girl you were. So then Ma went to the store herself and got the milk.
How long did it take for your brother to come along after your mother and dad got back together?
Well,
9 months or so?
9 years.
Years.
Ernie was 9 years younger than I.
How about Raymond?
And Raymond was younger than that.
Well, he was after her.
So Raymond was the last one. But he died in, when was it? But he died when he was 10 months old.
No, 18 months, Mother.
I think Greta was wrong there. Yeah, well, he was,
That's what Greta said, a year and a half.
well, then he was a year and a half if she said it, because she was always right.
How about school? Well, did you enroll in school then when you got
So
to
then,
Minneapolis?
when we got here, Martha had to start kindergarten. Greta had to start kindergarten. We all started kindergarten. Not Sonia, because she wasn't old enough. But we had to start in kindergarten. And Martha went home and she told my mother she wasn't going to school another day. She says, I can't stand making those paper rings.
She was probably a moose
And-
compared to the kindergartners.
So she had to stay there till so long until we could learn how to say something. None of us could talk English. And so then Martha started going upwards. And Greta went right behind her. So they were ahead of us, ahead of me. But I stayed in kindergarten till I was about 7.5.
What school was that?
And that was Longfellow School.
Okay.
That old Longfellow School was on Lake Street and 27th. And that school isn't there. That was moved to another place. But we had to talk and learn our English because the teacher says you cannot have a brogue. So we all had to be preached to all the time about our talking.
What church did you go to when you started?
Oh, when I went to, Sunday was the day that we couldn't do anything but go to church. So we went to Sundale's church. We went to my Lutheran church. And then we went to another church on 25th Street. So we went to 3 different churches on Sunday.
How about Salvation Army,
Well, wait,
Mother?
And
something
then we
happened.
went- Huh?
Something happened. You were still very poor, weren't you?
Oh, so when
And,
we first came, we didn't have anything.
And what happened? That was an interesting
And
story.
that was on Thanksgiving. That was in November. And somebody came and...
That was your first year over in America, right?
Well, yes, because we came in November, but Thanksgiving was later.
Yeah, so just a few weeks later you're talking about.
So just a few weeks later, then they came with a basket, and my mother,
Who's they?
well, that was the Salvation Army.
Oh.
And then they came and gave us so my mother could fix us all a nice big dinner. But then at Christmas time, we were so happy because we each got a big orange and an apple for Christmas. And then they came with another big basket for us. And my mother didn't know to her dying day whoever sent her a check or $25. And she never did find out, but she got on her knees right there. And thank God for what we got.
That'd be like 500 or more today. At least probably.
Did you have when you moved to this country, did you have a gas stove or still did you have a wood stove here?
No, we had wood stove.
Here?
Yeah.
Each had wood stove when I was little.
Oh.
I had wood stove when I was at Sundell's.
And cooked on wood stove too?
And we cooked on, I burnt my hind end a lot of times on that old heater. Because I got so close to it.
Did you bake good food though?
Oh, it baked. We always had good. We always had lots of good food.
You
Bake
did all your
bread.
canning on that stove too, Mother, right?
Yeah. I did all my canning.
When did you get, when did Pa build 3040? Longfellow.
That was some,
But
Oh,
anyways,
That's right.
what was it we had? We got there at, on 27th there. We had a lot of fun though, us 3 or 4 girls. We'd sit on the curb and watch the fire trucks pull out of the fire barn.
Where was that at?
That was on Minnehaha,
For the
Oh,
parade.
right off
Parade.
of Lake Street.
Oh yeah.
still there, Paul.
Yeah. It's a theater now.
And so we would sit there, and we thought that was those poor horses, how they had to run with that water tank out there, and that's all they had was that water that was in that tank to put out a fire. But we had a nice time in Sweden too, because we'll never forget the Christmases we had there. We always had a big Christmas tree, and we had nothing but candles. But we would dance around the Christmas tree, and then we'd be singing "Nu är det jul igen, nu är det jul igen, och efter jul kommer påska."
And we did that at Muma's too.
Yeah, and we had an awfully lot of fun that way. But
When was Ernie born?
he was born here.
When though?
He was born 9 years. Well, he was 9 years older than I.
So
Younger,
just a
Mother.
couple of years.
Younger.
Couple of years after you got here.
Yeah. I
He
would
was 7
say.
when they got here.
I would say it would be.
9 years later.
Oh.
But you know,
Ernie was
was-
born 9 years later.
You were born. It's 9 years later than she was born.
I was born
Yeah.
1907.
So she was 16 when he came along. Your
It was
mother
9
was
years
16 when
between.
Ernie was born.
Oh, 9 years between you. I thought you said it was 9.
No, 9 years.
9 years exactly. See, Ernie. Now I'm 87, and Ernie would have been 90
No.
or
Ernie was-
76.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, who else was born out here in this country?
That was just the 2 boys that was born here. Pa said he had to come to the United States to get a boy, which wasn't much help.
Well, then, when did you move into the homestead there on, what avenue was it?
3133, 24th Avenue.
24th Avenue. My dad, where the that was moved from Hiawatha, where you know that big
Minneapolis Lane, what are you thinking about?
no, where where you can buy iron stuff on Hiawatha there.
Acme Foundry.
The foundry.
Yeah, they were going to put that up, so they moved our house to 24th Avenue and 32nd.
Oh.
So my dad got that house for $1,500,
Oh.
and it was really, really a nice house, but it had a sand basement
Mhm.
and everything that my dad had to work with and take care of. But in those days, my mother could say, Greta, go and buy 25 cents worth of pork chops and we'll have that for supper. But 25 cents was like $5 now.
Oh yeah. I'm sure.
So she would get all the meat she needed.
How much did a loaf of bread cost?
And a loaf of bread, we bought twin loaves. That would be 5 cents for twin loaves. But it was good bread.
Where were the
But
markets?
we didn't buy much bread because Ma would be baking all her bread.
Where were the markets at?
What?
Where was the market at?
The market?
Where you'd go grocery shopping?
Well, we had a little butcher shop on the corner. See, when we lived on Minnehaha, we had the fire barn here and the police station across the street. And then our little grocery store was in the middle of that.
Oh, okay.
So it was a good store. And then my mother got acquainted with John Swanson, where we could charge our groceries.
Oh,
So then she could put in an order and every week and have. So we'd have that for the whole week then when she put in her order. But then she paid maybe $3 a week on the grocery bill.
you didn't have a freezer though, did you?
No,
Freeze
we
anything?
had an old ice box.
Where would you keep the meat? Just cold?
Well, we never had that much meat on hand. We'd have to go and buy meat.
Oh,
Like daily, Mother?
I like daily.
What, did you say you were one of the first to go to Roosevelt High School
Yes, I was.
when it was
And-
first built?
When was that built?
It's built about
Oh, no, I wouldn't know.
I think it was 1918.
1918?
In case anybody's wondering, one of her
You-
great grandchildren
Yeah, I
just
would-
crawled up in her lap.
I was about, I think I was about 15 years old when I went there.
Oh, at age 15,
They had
What year
They
would that
had-
be?
7th grade.
22, Paul.
They opened with
It was
7th
there
grade.
About 4 years after it was built. I think it was built in 18.
Okay, did you have any boyfriends at this point? How many boyfriends did you have before you
No,
met Rudy?
all the kids at school, all they could do, and I never hated school as much as that because all they did was to take my 2 grades and say, giddy up, giddy up, giddy up, and I was crying my eyes out at the same time. But they thought that was funny.
So you had no boyfriends?
Oh, never.
Never dated?
Never had.
Then how did you ever hook up with Rudy, your first husband? Tell us about that.
I could never because my mother never would let us go to a show because if we were at a show and Jesus should come, we would be gone.
Oh, you go the wrong other way.
And so we never had but we had a lot of company all the time. After church, everybody accumulated at our house for coffee and rolls.
How did you happen to meet your first husband?
How did I happen to meet him? Because I went to Sundell's church.
Oh, you went to the First Swedish Baptist on 31st and Longfellow.
Yeah.
Okay, there you met.
Well, I didn't. I knew of him, but Martha was going to go to a hockey game with him. And then she said, "Why don't you take my sister?" And so he took her sister.
How old were you then?
Oh, gee, I was about 18 years old,
Okay.
19, something like that.
How did it happen to butt into a romance?
But we just started going to a hockey game, not thinking it was going to be anything.
What, like a Minnesota Gopher hockey game or what?
'Cause
What hockey?
What were they
that was
called?
at the arena.
What were
the
they
Millers,
called?
probably.
The Millers?
What is it?
Yeah, they called them the Millers.
Yeah.
But I had another boyfriend from church too, but I didn't. He always kept calling me, and I didn't want to go with him.
Talk to the camera.
So I went with him, and then Ma says, Ella, she said, "You got a nice big bouquet of flowers here." I said, "Well, you keep those, Ma, because I don't care for him anyhow." So she said, "That isn't nice." She said, "You go and thank him for it." So I just told him, I says, I was busy going with somebody else for the time being. And so then I started going with Ruby's dad. And we got married in 1928.
You were how old then?
I was about
21?
22. We got married in November.
Did you work during this time?
Did I work?
Had you been working before you married Rudy?
Oh, yes, I worked at the Munsingware.
How old were you when you started there?
I started when I was 18. And I worked there all the time. Good thing I had that job.
This wasn't exactly a marriage made in heaven, but it was made in the First Swedish Baptist Church then.
Yeah.
Is that where you got married?
I got married in Greta's house
In Greta's house.
on Pleasant and 25th.
Oh, that big old mansion.
What was the date, Mother?
It was it was on Thanksgiving, the 27th of November, 1928.
And where did you move in and make a family
And
with
we
Rudy?
lived upstairs at Sundell's
Yeah.
until he got sick and he died.
Well, wait a minute. You didn't have your children yet.
Oh, I had
You begot Ruby.
I had Ruby about 2.5 years after I was married.
On what day?
That was April 29, 1931.
Okay, and then you had another child with him.
Then I had another one. I had Sonny in
That's wrong.
June 29, 1931.
33, Mother.
33.
How did Sonny get his nickname?
Sonny got that because his grandpa started calling him Sonny Boy.
But his real name is,
It was really Sunny Boy. That's
What
what he went
grandpa?
by.
And
Yeah.
Sonny, it was always, to them anyways, it was always Sonny. So then we decided I'd call him Rudolph. And he said, no way will he ever have that name. So
who said that?
his dad, because his name was Rudolph.
Oh.
So then we called him Ronald Raymond, because that was my brother that died. His name was Raymond. So we called him Ronald Raymond Sundell.
And who named me, Mother?
And Sam will never live that down, because I just let him,
And what did he name me, Mother?
Ruby Romaine Sundell.
Well, Ruby's close to Rudy. It's like a junior Rudy.
No, well, Ruby was because
That
they
was a
lost the
sister. They
little
lost a
girl
sister.
that name. So that's why they wanted that name.
And you lived there till what happened to Rudy?
Then I lived there for about a year after her dad died. Then I happened to buy a house, little house for us, and that was in 38, because your dad died in 37. And I bought that in 38 from Hendrickson.
What address was that?
And that was 26,
2406.
2406.
32nd Street.
East
32nd.
East
And
32nd.
then
Now, Mother, you just said Hendrickson, and you've
Oh,
always
I
said
mean-
Engelbretson.
Engelbretson. Hendrickson was
Yeah.
our other butcher. Engelbretson. And so I paid $300 down on that. That's all I had. And then it cost $15 a month. And every time I made the payment, he always said, now, are you sure you got enough for the children? And I said, yes, I had. So I paid $15 a month rent. And the three of us lived there.
To tell them how much
That was
work you had to
mortgage
do.
payment, not rent.
And that house was a total wreck inside, but all the women, my mother said, I'm going to get all the women together and we're going to clean that house up. And a dear friend of mine, he rewired the house. And they cleaned the house. By the time they got through, it looked like a little dollhouse.
It happened to be within 35 feet of her mother and her sister.
Yeah.
They were all three right together.
So it was just, everybody got in there and did the work. Then I was there with my two kids. And of course, we had 2 bedrooms. But the kids slept in my room most of the time.
Tell them why, Mother.
Because I'd let them sleep with me, but I'd sleep in the middle.
Afraid of the boogeyman.
Who was afraid of what?
She was afraid of
She
the
had
boogeyman.
one child on each side.
So I had one on each side. And that's the way they slept in their bunk bed once in a while, but most of the time they were in my bedroom.
Times were tough then too, weren't they? It was still the Depression before World War
What
II.
was our big treat, Mother, on a Saturday night?
Oh, we go and buy a comic book and
An orange.
an orange, and then we'd come back home.
And listen to what? Sunset?
Well, that what was
Sunset Valley Barn Dance.
yeah on the barn dance. Then you kids would listen to that. We had
How?
they had a real good time. And then Ruby started growing up, so she got a job at the root beer stand across the street. And she worked there for a long time.
How did you run into John Paul's dad?
And then, well, that was a neighborhood thing because all the guys would get in together, and this people that lived on the corner house knew Paul's dad real well. So they said, you should go over and see that widow across the street.
You mean Sanders?
No.
So that's how I met Paul's dad.
Let's see. You mean he took the initiative and came over to meet you, right?
He came over. And we sat and talked and had coffee and visited and had a nice time.
Talk to Ken.
What was
And
his
I
name?
don't know why I look at Dave all the time. I'm looking at Paul too.
What was John Paul's father's name?
Paul's dad's name was John Vincent Smith, but we always called him Vince.
How long did it take him to pop the question?
And then we lived in that little house. Then we lived on a house on Nokomis.
No, Mom.
No, you
What
haven't
year
married
did
him
you
yet.
marry Vince?
Oh, I
You haven't
married
married
him
him
in 1941, I think it was.
How soon after you met him did you get married?
It was all of a.
How long were you single, Mother, before you married Vince?
Oh, I was pretty near 5 years.
Yeah,
Four
so it
or
was
four.
more than 41 when she married.
So it was pretty near 5 years when I
42.
About 42 then.
when I married your dad.
And when did you begot this handsome young man?
And no, I was working for a long time, and Paul was born in 45,
What date?
the 28th of February. He was born.
But you had a terrible time.
Yeah, well,
And what happened?
I went to the hospital several times before he was born. And then the doctor said to me afterwards, "Why," he says, "you're lucky you got this boy." And everything went so well because I was in. One time they took me in the ambulance, and I came back home, and of course then I started washing some walls and that was my own fault. Then I wound up there again.
You almost bled to death, in other words.
Yeah. So finally we got Paul.
Where,
And then my mother said, "Oh," she says, "Ella, that's a nice boy." And she says, "He'll be a lot of comfort to you." That's what my mother said.
what house did we live in, or did you live in then?
I
Where Paul
lived
was
in the little house.
30,
When I was born?
2406 East 32nd.
When he was born.
Yeah.
But
That's
you
where
soon
Paul-
shortly moved to where?
No, Mother.
We lived in that
We
house.
lived, when Paul was born, we lived on 32nd Avenue and 34th
Yeah,
Street.
that's where we lived.
Yeah.
Okay, you had sold the little house.
3428 32nd
Yeah.
Avenue.
After she married Vince, they bought a
Yeah.
bigger house.
Yeah, and that's where we had the rocking chair. And all his dad would ever do was to sit there and rock him and sing, "Heidi, Heidi, Heidi, Daddy's little guy." And that's all you would hear ringing in the house.
I thought we lived up north Minneapolis for a while.
Okay,
we
now you
did.
moved up there. That's where I started going with Ruby.
We moved
No.
there afterward.
4th
4343 James Avenue
James
North.
Avenue North.
James Avenue.
That's where I started.
And that's
to
where,
think.
where you always went on your kitty cart up and down the street. But you'd never go across the street.
Do you remember Sonny Doberstein,
And
who
he
you
would,
played with?
he'd come over to your side of the street, but you didn't cross the street because you weren't supposed
Was that
to.
people like dog over there?
I don't remember James Avenue North at all. I didn't think I was that old there.
And then we had a dog.
You were,
We had a wiener dog that we had to get rid of because every time the last time the Raleigh man came to my house, he was talking to you and he was getting too close to you and he came and he ripped his whole pants leg off, down. The whole thing got torn open.
But they didn't sue in those days.
was that the Raleigh man or the Royal Laundry man?
No, it was the Raleigh man. But anyways,
Then how? Then
we had we put him to sleep after that. We had to get rid of him.
okay. Then the last place you lived with Vince was where? You moved to what?
The last place we lived was
No, they moved from there to Second Avenue.
Oh, that's right in Bedford. Too.
yeah, that's where.
Oh, we're on East River Road. Right?
East River Road. That's where I really started dating.
East
Then
River
from there
Road,
we went to
Second Avenue.
Yeah, East River Road,
went to
and that was oil
Yeah,
heat
Second-
over
Second
there.
Avenue, and then Bedford.
Okay, Bedford is where you moved in with some more
Uh-huh.
Smiths.
We moved into Bedford then, and that's where
Wally and his gang.
Paul. When we lived there, when Paul had to have his tonsils
No,
out.
we were wrong. We went from Second Avenue to 59th and
What?
That's right, I forgot that.
50,
Oh, and then you went to, wait a minute, then you went to see,
42nd and Bloomington.
42nd Bloomington,
Oh yeah, the double bunk.
No,
right by
First
us.
from 59th and Nicollet we went.
Yeah,
We went from 59th and Nicollet to Bedford.
and the last
Bedford
place we lived at
to
was on the
Bloomington.
Comas.
Yeah, 'cause Mike and Vicky were little when you
Bedford
lived.
to Bloomington. Bloomington to Nicollet.
Yeah, but do you remember the last place was Nokomis?
Yeah.
And that's where you lost a pair of brand new glasses you had gotten for one day,
Yeah.
and you didn't know if you'd dare to come up or not.
Well, in the interim now, when you were married to Vince and Paul was growing up, you had something else happen. Your daughter got what?
Oh, my daughter got,
Married?
oh yeah, she got married.
And you had your first what? A year later.
On our first anniversary, what
Yeah.
happened?
Oh, then you got that grandson.
Your
I
first
got my
grandchild was
grandson.
born.
Was
The first
born,
one.
he was
June
born
1st.
on the East
June
River
1st.
Road.
Well, he was born in the hospital.
Yeah, he was born in that
Fairview.
house. But
June
then,
1st, 1940, what, 9?
but then Ruby was there. They lived upstairs, and so she took care of Paul and
And Mike,
and Mike,
and me.
and well, you too. You were all there. You all had a. It was a nice thing that we were all together. But it was a heck of a long ways to go to work. I had to get the bus every morning,
Where would you get the bus at?
right in front of the house, practically.
Right on the highway.
Didn't they go over the bridge into Camden or something?
Then I went to Camden.
Yeah.
And then I got my.
East River Road,
No, not the East River Road bus. That went straight down East River Road,
downtown.
yeah, right downtown.
Yeah. So we got there. But other than that,
Oh, and then you should say that I had to leave, when I went into labor, I had to take Paul and take the
Yeah.
bus all the way into Muma while I was in labor. And had to cross Lake and Bloomington with the labor pain so bad you wouldn't believe and hanging on to Paul.
Well, you were watching him that day it happened.
Oh, well, sure, I took care of him every day.
Oh.
yeah, he took care of him, and then
Sat at Muma's house.
so then he stayed at Muma's till I got there.
Where was Vince working?
You were at the hospital,
Okay, now Vince died. When was that?
and then Paul. Of course, Wally always wanted Paul to come with him. I know his dad said one time, why don't you get your own kids? But he always wanted Paul with him. And so Paul went with him home that weekend
Where?
that Vince got his heart attack. And I think
Where did they go?
they
Rice Lake.
they went to Rice Lake.
We had the bus company then.
He always stayed, he was at Rice Lake more than he was at home sometimes. And then Paul came home that time, and then his dad got this heart attack.
Mike
And-
and Paul were with him. Remember,
And
up at the station, the first heart attack?
And so then Paul was there, and he was just crying his eyes out because everybody in their neighborhood came when the ambulance came.
Don't you remember?
No, he was at home when he had his first heart attack.
Huh?
Yes. But you had been up to Phil's station
Oh,
earlier in the day, you and Mike.
And so then he had to go to the hospital, and he was there for 8 weeks. Every night after work, I would stop in at the hospital for just a few minutes to see him, and then I would come home and get something to eat so Paul and I could go to the hospital. Then we would go to the hospital until we had to go home. So we did that practically every night.
This was back in what, 57?
No, was it 57? No. Yeah, Mark was just born.
Yeah, well, he
He died
died.
a year later.
He died in 57.
58, wasn't it? 58.
And then
58.
then Paul was gone when his dad died. He was in Wisconsin.
So you were married to Vince about 16 years then,
Yeah.
and Rudy about
9.
9 years. Okay.
And now what
What
about
was-
Sonny, Mother? We haven't mentioned Sonny. What did Sonny do?
Well, I know when we lived in the little house, Ruby and Sonny always kept cleaning the house and taking care of that, so I'd always be nice when I got home at night. Anyways, this Friday night, Sonny said, Mother, can I go with the boys and play? And I said, yeah, but be careful. And
What boys, Gumpy?
it was just I was pregnant with Paul then.
That was with Gumpy and Nook and the whole bunch
Yeah,
of boys.
and then I said, you go ahead and but be home early.
How old was Sonny?
Sonny was about, I would say he was about 11
12.
or 10.
He's about 12, Mother.
Oh, I don't think he was that old. I think he was 11. Anyways, then they came running down and said, oh, Sonny was hurt. And I just ran as fast as I could, and your dad was after me, and then we got up there.
Where was it at?
That was up on the hill,
23rd Avenue and
20
34th Street.
34th Street. And he had fallen out of this tree, and thank God, if he would have fallen one way, he would have cut his whole neck off with that wire clothesline.
No.
But he fell, so they told me when we got him to the hospital, he laid in the ambulance, and he says, Mother, he says, I'm awfully sorry. And I said, Sonny, I said, don't be sorry. I said, I just feel so bad that you had to get hurt. And so then they took him, and Dr. Johnson got one of the best bone specialists there was. And they looked at him and they said, I'm afraid we're going to have to amputate his arm. And I said, oh no. So they worked on him from 9 o'clock till 4 o'clock in the morning, digging all the leaves out of his shoulder, out of his arm, and getting all the bones back into place. So he was just in a bad shape. And thank God they saved his arm. He still has a little big hump here. They said he could take care of that later on when he gets older. But he didn't have to because he said I'd never do anything more to it. But he was in the hospital for 3 weeks. And then when I got home, I had to give him treatment so he could move his hand. And then finally he got to move his fingers. So I could see that there was some life coming back to his arm. But it was a wonderful thing. He got healed by the grace of God.
And then he got married.
He went into the service.
He went
He
into
went
service
into the
first.
service, and he was there for 3 years.
In Korea.
And
Came back and met his love.
so then he had been going with her before. He met Audrey. So then Audrey and him got married, and then they came to our house on Bedford and had their wedding dinner.
Dave and I stood up for them.
Yeah, David stood up for him.
Where'd they get married at?
Same place that Dave and I did, Northwood, Iowa. And the same place that Marion and Nan got married.
Oh, and you had two
And Greta
grandchildren.
and Sam.
You had 2 grandchildren
Yeah.
by now too, because Vicky had come along there a few years before Vince died.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's right, we forgot another grandchild.
Yeah, so
And we even had a 3rd one before Vince died.
well, Vince always was. He thought that Vicky was everything to him. So he bought her a pair of pants, skunk pants. I got them at work, and he gave her those skunk pants so she could always pull her dress up and see the skunk in her pants. So that was 2 grandchildren that Vince had.
Well, before he died.
3. Mike was born in 57.
Who?
Mark
Mark.
was born in
Mark.
57.
Well, Mark was a little baby over
He
on the
was
Comus.
1 year old when
You were
Vince
living on
passed
the
away.
Comus Avenue by Maniac Creek when
He was
Vince
1 year
died.
old.
That's
Yeah.
right. Well, tell us a little about life with just you and Paul then, after Vince died.
Well,
Because your 2 older children were gone by now.
I was a widow, but I know when their dad died, I used to sit when I come home at night. I'd think, I can't wait till they grow up, and it's going to be a long time. But they grew up, and I got 3 of the most wonderful children.
Good.
What about when we lived over with Audrey and Sonny? Remember that? Over on Hiawatha? They moved in with us after Dad died.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that didn't work out very good.
Well, then we moved from there though.
So to the double bungalow on
Right. Then we moved to 28th Avenue.
28th Avenue. That's where
That's
where
where I went to
it was,
Roosevelt.
That's where Paul went to Roosevelt and turned into a man.
and then
Made a woman out of a neighbor.
Yeah.
and then Paul enlisted, and then he told me, and I thought, oh, Paul, I said, what did you do that for? And then on top of that, they had shaved his head and everything.
Yeah.
Dave took a hold of it and made well.
Let me tell you that story. My whole family and Ella are down in my basement.
No, Mother was at work. We were
Oh,
with
that's
Mother
right,
over
that's
at the
right.
lake end.
I'm sorry, she saw it later. My whole family were downstairs. I had just gotten a brand new barbering kit, and I thought, why not try it on Paul? I mean, I can't screw up too bad because everybody gets a haircut when they first go in the army, right? So I started with the good intentions of giving him a nice, even haircut. But each time I'd screw up a little, I have to take off an attachment and make it a little shorter. When I got done, I got it just right down to the baldness, like whiskers showing all over his head.
Then not only
We were laughing so hard, I think all 5 of us peed in our pants.
Oh, gee,
standing
that
there,
was a wrong
giving
Was
him
it
a
the best
haircut.
haircut, John Paul?
Best haircut.
And then
And
when
you know, when he got to Omaha,
No words.
Port Leonard Wood, they still give him a haircut, or on the buzzer over his head.
Yeah, but when I got home and saw his head and everything, I thought, oh, this is
The
it.
one time I've seen her really
Yep, she
angry.
was mad at me.
Really angry.
But I wasn't sorry that he went and enlisted because he got out of that Vietnam War anyhow. So that was one blessing.
He went to Germany.
Yeah, Germany and France.
That might help.
Is that it now?
No,
No,
we just
no.
want to get more light.
No, you were only up to living with Paul alone.
Paul alone, yes.
And you,
I was alone with,
Did you say where you lived with Paul on 28th Avenue?
I lived with Paul on 28th Avenue. Thank goodness I paid my rent for what I got for him every month, $87. So I paid my rent on that.
You didn't say much about your new son-in-law either.
And then from there, wait, no, I was gonna, you know,
no, you were talking
when
about,
we lived on 28th,
right, but then I went in the Army for 3
then,
years.
yeah,
And
and
you
you
met
were-
Louis, right?
but as far as that goes, you remember when we lived on 28th there all the time? Every night you'd say, can I go down and get us each a roll at that
Yeah,
coffee shop?
Mellow Glaze.
yeah.
So we'd always had that.
Yeah, we ate a lot of rolls out of Mellow Glaze when you guys had.
And then when we lived on Minnehaha, you know, I had to call, you didn't come home, you went skating. And you didn't come home right on time, so I called Ruby and Dave to go and see if you were smoking
We would never tell.
Yeah.
on the creek there. So they came and brought him home.
Skating down by Hiawatha, right?
Yeah.
Was he smoking?
Well, they wouldn't tell me.
Could you smell it though?
Was he smoking?
Yeah, I suppose I was.
I know you were with the boys, and
You
I
started just like I did, about 15, Ella.
Yeah.
Were you smoking?
Sure. You can't smell another person smoking.
She started smoking
That's why
right
I know
after
she
Paul
couldn't
was
tell.
born.
I
She
started. I didn't smoke much either because it cost a lot of money to be buying cigarettes. So I would buy a package so I would have it work when we went down for coffee. Essie and I.
When you were telling the story earlier about how you would invite everyone to come to your mother's house for coffee,
Yeah.
I always heard that that's what John Paul did to you when you lived, I don't know which house it was, I just remember him always inviting all the neighbors over to have coffee and rolls at
There
your
was a
house.
tendency in our family to do that because I used to do it on Longfellow when I lived with my grandparents and
You did.
invited everybody on the
Where
block
was
to
Paul
come.
in North Minneapolis? Pretty young
Where was
there,
he
wasn't
when he did that, Mother? Where were you living when he did
Oh,
that?
you were young even on East River Road.
Well,
I just think
when we lived in that house where they had that basement house.
That was East River Road.
Yeah, and then Paul would go and say, "Come on over and have coffee
That's
with my
East
mother."
River Road, yeah.
Oh yes,
I think that was something that must have traveled through the family.
Yeah, that was were they those people?
Gabrick?
In
Well, the
basement
people that
house?
lived up, the basement was Gabrick. But I don't remember who lived, that other little boy that lived upstairs. Do you remember that you played with? Paul? I don't remember what the last names
The
were.
last name was Paul.
his name was Paul too, but I can't remember the last name to save my soul.
I thought it
Well,
was-
But anyways,
you had,
we had a lot of hardship and a lot of good times.
What year did you meet? Louis?
And then Louis, 1963. And that was through Esther. She was bound I was going to meet Louis.
Fritz's brother.
And I was afraid to meet Louis on account of Fritz.
No.
And of course, he came over to our house on 28th and with Esther and Fritz and Martha. They stopped in one Saturday morning. And so I had just washed my hair and I had made a batch of cookies and that. and clean the house. And then who should come and rap at the door but Esther and Fritz and Martha.
Mhm.
And then he said to Martha afterwards, "Oh, but she's got a clean house. Everything looks so nice." And so then after that, then I went over and made dinner at Martha's house one Sunday, helped Martha. And then
Can we shut that off?
Esther and Fritz,
Have our pie?
Wait a minute.
And Martha came over on the patio there, and we hadn't had our pies yet, but they came over there when I was going to just serve the pie. And my land, Sam and Louie started talking together all about the shop because they'd done business in these Bemis and Sam's shop.
Oh,
That's when you first saw him.
So that isn't the first time.
No, but that's when.
Yeah, and then after that, he had said to Esther, called Esther and said, "Isn't it funny? How come she's got, her name is Smith, Sundell, and how come it's a Smith?" Anyways, Esther said, "It isn't a Sundell anymore, it's a Smith. It's Ella Smith." "Oh," he says, "I didn't quite understand that." Then he looked up my telephone number.
well,
But he didn't ask Esther for the telephone number.
Hold your thought there, Ella. We're going to stop for a moment
All right?
and have a little dessert.
Well, I'll have to tell you about when the twins were born. My Paul called me and said, "Mother, we got a girl." And then he called me back and he said, "Mother, you better sit down. We got another girl." I could have fallen over, but they were so tiny. They were both put in isolettes, and they both looked like, it's awful, they're the cutest girls you've ever seen, but they looked like two plucked chickens. And I always told the girls, and they know to this day what I said when they were born. They were like two little plucked chickens, and they were, and now they are just two beautiful girls. And had good work and done a lot to help out with everything in the house and everything. But anyways, then I got married to Louis.
What date?
That was October 16th,
1964.
1964.
What else happened that same night?
And we were sitting at the Lexington and had our dinner. We had our dinner because Paul was in the service at that time. And as we were sitting there, Ruby couldn't even have a bite to eat because she had to go to the hospital. And so we had the dinner and everything. And then we went over to Greta's house after the wedding. We got a call that Linda was born on our wedding night. So we never forgot our anniversary or anything because it was Linda's birthday too. And then after that, I moved into our house on 35th Avenue and had a lot of happy moments. And we had a lot of Christmases and everything in our basement and enjoyed it. And had all the kids. And they've always said it was nothing like having the Christmas at Grandma's house. And from there, then we lived in our house 28 years. Wasn't it before he died? At 28 years. And Louis took sick and had to go to the hospital. But I never thought that he'd go so soon, and he died. So that was another sad, sad deal. But life has to go on, and I'm thank God I've got all the nice children and grandchildren and great grandchildren. They're always there to help.
How many great grandchildren did you say?
And I had
We say 9?
10,
10 is it?
10 grandchildren and 7 great
7?
grandchildren.
So far, there'll be more.
5,
No, 7, there'll be more.
7.
One more on the way.
So I've got a lot of children and everything. So I've had a wonderful life, just having the children around me all the time. And then I had to move, and everything got. I thought I could never move out of the house because I didn't know how to start with it.
But you had
But
something.
Ruby and
Wait a minute, something traumatic happened.
Ruby and Dave, they got busy and they said, "Don't worry, we'll get everything done." So they got going and moving, and everybody helped, and they were right there all the time and got the apartment for me, which Linda picked out and got going on. And I'm glad she did get going on it, because it seemed like I just never could get to move.
Where are you living now?
So now I'm living at the teacher's apartment, 2625 Park Avenue. And I'm happy there because I can at least go home and sleep at night. And I even take my hearing aid out.
And what was one of the main reasons you moved, though, Mother?
Well, the main reason was because I've kind of lost my eyesight somewhat,
It's hard to take care of a house alone.
and I just couldn't take care of the house alone. I couldn't expect all of my kids to come over and do work because they've got their own things to do. And I've got great daughter-in-laws, great son-in-law, great son-in-law. I only have one son-in-law, isn't it?
Finally, we got to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I've got so many things to be thankful for. Things may seem impossible sometimes, but they all get straightened out. And that's my life.
That's your life.
Did you also mention you lost a grandson?
Oh, yes. I lost
Louis.
I lost my grandson, Mike, which meant an awful lot to me because he was always there to see me, but was frightened to go and get his heart taken care of. So that was very, very sad. But
What year was that?
that was 19
91?
91.
And
91.
Louis died what year?
92. Mike died in May, and Louis died in April.
Oh,
And
Almost
then
1 year.
Paul and Barbara decided to go to California, which I thought was terrible because I never wanted my kids to move that far away.
I'll go get it right now.
But thank goodness they decided to come back to Minneapolis where they belong.
and here we are.
So here they are.
So now your flock's all back together again.
So now the whole bunch is all together.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to say one thing.
What?
I sure picked a wonderful mother-in-law.
Oh, well, I hope I've done right to all of them.
No, you did.
And daughter-in-law, the one standing there taking the picture, she's standing looking at me constantly. But she's something nice to have around.
Thank you.
And my daughter here, she watches over me all the time.
Yeah, but we wouldn't be anything
Well,
that we
it's your
are,
mother and
or
son
wouldn't
in
be
there.
anybody if it wasn't for you,
Let's
Mother.
see. Good tape.
Mm.
Mwah, that was good.
And I love my my baby.
That was good. Sit down next to her. We have a director here now all of a sudden.
Yeah,
This is
it's too
Come
bad
on.
Paul isn't here.
Sunny,
Paul.
Sunny.
And this is
Sunny.
only part of them,
Dave gets confused.
Easily.
but there's other ones I love just as much
And
too.
we love Sonny and Audrey too.
Sonny and
They'll
Audrey.
get a
Sonny
copy of
and
the tape.
Audrey.
Sure.
But they weren't here.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, and I love everybody.
That's all, folks.
Sing, Ella.
Oh, I've got to sing and say my prayers like I've said to all my grandchildren and my children. And that prayer is the one that the kids want to hear.
This is Swedish prayer.
The
Yeah.
one we always said. Don't
Which
you
one?
remember? Gud som haver
Gud som haver barn en kär, se till mig som liten är. Vart jag mig i världen vänder, står min lycka i Guds händer. Lyckan kommer, lyckan går. Den Gud